all things considered, Jake Dickert's first full year at Washington State should be considered a success. The Cougars finished the year at 7-6 and made their second straight bowl game, but now it's time to start building. Entering his second full year in Pullman, now it's time to start building, becoming more competitive, becoming more consistent, and becoming a true contender in the Pac-12. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, guys. We're so glad you could join us today as we're ready to break down, analyze, and predict Washington State's schedule and record for this upcoming college football season. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. And of course, check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. Some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country, beating out 80% of the national handicappers each of the last 5 years. Also, check out our Patreon account, become a member of our Patreon Wall of Fame, and gain access to exclusive content year-round, only found on Patreon. And check out our mailing address as well. Send us some gear to represent your team in every single GE video. Would love to get some gear from Washington State, Washington, anything out there on the West Coast. Send us some gear to represent your team in every video as our GE Nation expands from coast to coast. So let's take a look at Washington State. I will say this, I am a huge fan of Jake Dickert. I thought he handled the interim role extremely well a few years ago. I thought it was only right to give him the head coaching position in Pullman, and I thought he lived up to the hype and the expectations last year as the Cougars went 7-5 in the regular season before dropping their bowl game to Fresno State. You take a look at this year, the offense is an area that should take a step forward because they kind of disappointed a little bit in 2022. They averaged 26.1 points per game last year. And I think that was somewhat lackluster considering everybody they had coming back and the addition of Cameron Ward at quarterback from Incarnate Word. I think their new offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, I think he fixes that. And I think Washington State might flirt with 30 points per game on average this year. 7 starters are back on that side of the ball. Cam Ward is one of them after throwing for over 3,200 yards and 23 touchdowns. Nikia Watson returns at running back after rushing for nearly 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. The only problem is the offensive line is a little shaky for Washington State, and the Cougars do lose their top 4 pass catchers from last year. So quarterback's there, running back's there. That's about it. They got a lot of new young pieces in the wide receiver core and up front that can kind of dictate how great this offense can be. Defensively, that's Jake Dickert's strength, right? He was a defensive-minded coach. That's why he took over. That's where he took over from. And last year it showed. 22.9 points per game is all they allowed, but the secondary's got to improve. The Cougars giving up 268 passing yards per game. Not good, especially as you're facing some of the more elite quarterbacks in the Pac-12 this season. 5 starters back on defense for Washington State. They do lose 4 of their top 6 tacklers. But the key is, the weakness last year was what? The passing defense. 3 starters back in the secondary, a lot more experience, should be a lot better, and that could lead to maybe even a better season for the Cougars in 2023. Take a look at their schedule. You know, we talked about that. I mean, you're facing some great quarterbacks this year. You're going to face UCLA and Dante Moore, Oregon and Bo Nix. You're going to face Washington and Michael Penix. But you look and you see, oh, look, I avoided USC. I avoided Utah. I mean, there is opportunities there for Washington State to rack up some wins. And their first win will come in week 1 against Colorado State on the road. You want to talk about offensive struggles? Colorado State has them. Couldn't even average 14 points per game last year. It was downright awful. I don't expect a major leap forward, especially in week 1. Washington State wins big, just like they did last year, taking down the Rams 38-7. They're 1-0. Then they host Wisconsin. And I will continue to die on the hill that Pullman is one of the more underrated places to play in the Pac-12. I don't think people give it nearly enough credit for how tough it can be. So Wisconsin's got to be careful here. Washington State went on the road last year to Madison, Camp Randall Stadium, and won 17-14 as 17-point underdogs against the Badgers. They have a legitimate shot to make it 2 in a row against Wisconsin, which if you told me a few years ago that the Cougars would win both, I'd say you're crazy. Because I think you are crazy. Wisconsin's going to win this game. This is a new-look Wisconsin team. Luke Fickell, now the head coach in Madison. Tanner Mordecai transferring in at quarterback from SMU. The Badgers finally have an elite quarterback, maybe the best quarterback they've had since the Russell Wilson era. Braylon Allen, one of the best running backs in the country, returns. The defensive line loaded extremely well. And you look at Wisconsin this year, you could beat Wisconsin, you could hold it because the offense was practically non-existent. Why? They were just run. And you knew, if they drop back to pass, they're not a legitimate threat. This year they are. It's going to be a completely different look. The Badgers are going to be a lot more balanced. And I think Tanner Mordecai comes in here, kind of shows what Washington State, this new look Wisconsin offense, exploits that Cougar secondary and gives Wisconsin revenge over the Cougars. It'll be close, but this is a completely different Wisconsin team. The ground and pound is gone. They're still going to run the ball effectively, but it's a brand new look, and I think Wisconsin will thrive with it. So Washington State drops the game at home, split the series against Wisconsin. They're 1-1. They beat Northern Colorado. They're 2-1. And let's make them 3-1 before the bye week with a win over Oregon State in a mini upset in Pullman. They lost to the Beavers by 14 last year, 24-10, but they outgained them. They were better offensively, slightly, than Oregon State last year. And that's the thing. I think, right now, while the Washington State secondary is a bit of a concern for me, I'm not too worried about Oregon State torching me through the air. I don't have a whole lot of faith in DJ Uyunglele coming out and throwing for 350 against me. I worry about Oregon State running for 350 against me. Washington State's rushing defense wasn't bad last year. So if they go in there and they shut down Damian Martinez, if they shut down Deshaun Fenwick, if they shut down that running back core for Oregon State that averaged 196 rushing yards per game last year, they're going to be just fine, especially with the game being at home. I think Washington State senses that urgency there, an opportunity to get a quality conference victory at home. They get it against the Beavers. A mini upset, and they're 3-1 heading into the bye week, and things are looking good. Only lost to a good Wisconsin team. Schedule gets tough out of the bye. It really does. Open up against UCLA, and I think this is a loss for Washington State. I think the Bruins are simply too good. I think that passing attack for UCLA, despite the loss of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Dante Moore is going to be really, really good. I think that's going to pan out really well for Chip Kelly, and I think that they're going to be able to exploit this Washington State secondary that improves every single week, but struggles a little bit at the Rose Bowl. UCLA's defense, too, don't sleep on them. 9 starters back. It's the best defense of the Chip Kelly era. I'm not saying they're going to go on to win the Pac-12, but they're going to be a lot saltier on that side of the ball than they have been in years past. I just don't think that Washington State has enough to keep up with the Bruins, despite the week of rest. So they're going to drop that game, but then they're going to bounce back at home and beat Arizona, what I like to call the Jaden DeLora Bowl, because that's basically what it is. DeLora beginning his career at Washington State, transferring to Arizona last year, and doing well with the Wildcats. He's going to do well again this year. Averaged 318 passing yards per game with Arizona last year. But now the game's in Pullman. Washington State's going to win it, just like they won it last year in Tucson. Won 31-20 on the road last year. What's the major reason for that? Arizona's terrible, terrible defense. That's what it comes down to. Arizona gave over 200 rushing yards per game. They were giving up, I think, close to 300 passing yards per game. It was just downright awful. So it was one of those things where it's like, hey, shut down Cam Ward. Fine, Nakia Watson finally is going to get some work done. He's going to finally get utilized a lot against this Arizona team that I don't really have a lot of faith shutting down that run game. So Washington State at home beats Jaden DeLora for the second time. And just like that, they've got 4 wins, 2 wins away from bowl eligibility. Problem is, it's not coming the next week. It's not coming on the road at Oregon. They should have beat Oregon last year. I'll stand by that hill. I'll die on that hill. I actually picked Washington State to beat Oregon last year, and I'm still a little bitter that the Cougars blew it for me. They were up by 12 points with under 4 minutes left and found a way to lose to the Ducks 44-41. The only thing I'll thank Washington State for there is that backdoor cover, literally, if time expired. So thank you for that. They lose 44-41 to the Ducks. Now the game's in Eugene. Oregon's going to be just as good, if not better, than they were last year. Bo Nix returning, a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender. 8 starters back defensively. Again, the Cougars just simply aren't going to have enough to keep up, to slow them down, and maybe won't be even able to stop Bo Nix, just kind of unable to do towards the end of the game last year. So they dropped the game to Oregon, and maybe a little hungover from that tough game against the Ducks, whether it's a beatdown or a emotional close loss, kind of like it was last year. They fall in the desert to Arizona State and first-year head coach Kenny Dillingham. This Arizona State team, I think, has the capability to surprise a few people, not by going to a bowl game necessarily, but by how competitive they will be, because they were kind of, left for dead after the whole Herm Edwards debacle. He left them in a state of an absolute dumpster fire, and Kenny Dillingham's coming in to try to put it out and clean it up. And I think he's going to do it a lot quicker than people think. This Arizona State secondary is actually one of the best, if not the best, in the conference. People don't know that. People don't realize that. So if Arizona State secondary comes in and shuts down Cam Ward, they shut that down, shut down the Washington State passing attack, which is what they want to do. And keep in mind, the Cougars losing their top 4 pass catchers. If they don't have that chemistry, Washington State's going to have to rely on their defense and their run game. That's not a recipe for victory, especially on the road. Arizona State wins, Washington State drops 2 in a row, and they still need 2 wins in the month of November to get to bowl eligibility. One of them comes against Stanford. Mark that up as an easy win. They beat the Cardinal 52-14 last year, torched the Cardinal. I'm telling you, 514 yards. Nakia Watson was busy. The Cougars' run game was busy. It was like Cam Moore take the day off. 306 rushing yards for Washington State against Stanford last year. The Cardinal are going to be probably even worse than they were in 2022. So that's an easy win, in my opinion, for Washington State. They go on the road to California. Kind of a toss-up game for me. Wouldn't be shocked at all to see Washington State win this game. In California, what their season's going to rely on is, they've got the experience, 17 starters back. I think the defense improves drastically. I think the offense is solid. What's the quarterback play look like? Does Sam Jackson, the transfer from TCU, does he live up to the hype? Does he get this offense rolling? Does Ben Finley get it going? If he gets a starting nod, we believe it's going to be Sam Jackson. If the quarterback play is lackluster, kind of like it's been the last few years, California struggles, Washington State wins. But I don't think that's the case. I think the offense pans out. I think California takes a major step forward offensively. The game is at home for the Golden Bears. I think Washington State drops it. I mean, they need one more win. 5 wins. They're 5-5. Need one more to go bowling. They get it the next week. Rest assured. They're going to get it. Senior day at home against a Colorado team that I'm just not buying the hype with. Deion Sanders is in. That's great. I think he'll do great there, just not in year 1. Not with all the new transfers coming in. No continuity. No chemistry. I just don't see this being a big year for Colorado, and you can't fix a 1-11 team that was allowing over 500 yards per game. You can't fix that and make them an elite contender in 1 year. It's just not happening. So at home, knowing that Washington State doesn't want to fight for bowl eligibility in the Apple Cup, they win big over Colorado. They've clinched bowl eligibility, and then they drop the game in Seattle to Washington. Remember, you don't want to have bowl eligibility on the line against your rival. You just don't want that. It'd be bittersweet to get it. It'd be awesome if you clinch that 6th win against your rival, or you prevented your rival from going bowling. That's awesome, but you don't want it all coming down to the final game of the year. And Washington State will ensure that's not the case. They lose to Washington, a team that's not just a Pac-12 title contender, but a legitimate college football playoff contender, a team that beat the Cougars 51-33 last year, a team that put up 703 yards of offense against Washington State and that Jake Dickert defense. I don't think the Huskies put up that much this year, but at home on their senior day, needing this win to maybe keep Pac-12 title hopes alive, maybe playoff hopes alive, Penix has himself a day against this Cougar secondary that certainly improves across the year, but won't look like they've improved against some of the better quarterbacks they face, like Michael Penix, like Bo Nix at Oregon, maybe even against a guy like Dante Moore and Tanner Mordecai at UCLA and Wisconsin. So with that, guys, Washington State, we have them finishing 6-6. It's a bit of a step back, 1-game step back, 7-5 last year, 6-6 this year. Regardless, it's a 3rd straight bowl appearance under Jake Dickert. He got him there as interim. He got him there last year as head coach. He's going to do it there again this year. And I think, if anything, that is consistency. He's going to get them to the point where they are legitimate Pac-12 title contenders. That takes time. Took a Mike Leach, when he was there, a long time to get him there. I believe Jake Dicker's the guy that can get that, can get them there, can improve. Washington State's a tough out. They're going to be competitive in a lot of these games. Might be able to beat California. Might beat Arizona State. Might beat Wisconsin. I think 8 wins could be the ceiling for the Cougars this year. I genuinely do. But I want to put them at 6-6 right now. Regardless, a bowl team, a tough out, underrated place to play, and Jake Dickert continuing to show that he is the right man for the job in Pullman. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below. Our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. Do not miss out on those. Go sign up for those today. Our Patreon account for exclusive college football content year-round. Our mailing address to send us some of your team's gear to be represented in every single video as we expand our GE Nation from coast to coast. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.